Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our retro throwback review of the BlackBerry PlayBook in 2017. When this was released in 2011, it sold at a hefty $499 for the 16GB version, which put it head-to-head to the Apple iPad 2, and as a 7-inch tablet, it could not offer nearly the amount of value that the iPad and other premium tablets offered at the time. One misconception about the PlayBook, though, is it was meant as a standalone media and productivity consumption device. It was meant as an ecosystem product, where if you already had a BlackBerry, you could have the bridge functionality and essentially uses as a larger display to extend the functions you have on your phone. This point was not made immediately clear, so when some folks picked up the tablet, they were initially a little disappointed since you needed to have a phone, a regular BlackBerry, to use features like accessing your email if you didn't want to go through just the browser. In terms of hardware, though, the PlayBook was undoubtedly a beautiful piece of design, and it's super hefty. For a 7-inch tablet, it feels quite substantial, and the weight is not that far off from a full 9.7-inch tablet, so it feels really premium. One thing that I immediately noticed looking back at this tablet is how large the bezels are, and there's actually a reason for that. This ran on the BlackBerry PlayBook OS, which was a precursor to BlackBerry OS 10, and unfortunately the PlayBook did not have, at first, a guaranteed release of this, and people have tried to port the OS on it for years, but essentially we have gestures that allow you to take advantage of multitasking as well as using these bezels to navigate through the UI. For instance, if we launch into a quick application like Pictures, I can swipe up just like in WebOS to look at my cards, which is kind of this metaphor for all the currently open applications I have. It makes it slightly easier to grip and hold. Otherwise, on the very top, there is a front-facing camera that is technically HD capable, and it's actually pretty bright and good enough for video chatting. One limitation of the PlayBook is its very limited app selection, and unfortunately that still remains true today. You can port some Android apps into it, but not everything is guaranteed to work. So with BlackBerry World, it's a very dwindling selection and array of apps, and you'll find that for things like video chatting, you're really tied to BlackBerry's ecosystem. So if you have another BlackBerry, it's pretty easy to video chat with family and friends, but if you want to install current apps like WeChat, that's just not going to work in 2017. So that's one of the downsides. Otherwise, you can see that this tablet does have front blasting or front-facing speakers located on the left and the right. And as far as watching movies and listening to music is concerned, this is one of the best-sounding tablets. The placement, in addition to the volume and the richness of these speakers, makes it really great for entertainment and watching films, just because it gets really loud and fills up small spaces quite well. Otherwise, on the very bottom of the tablet, you had information such as the capacity version. There's also a proprietary kind of pen on the side here that allows you to attach it onto an optional BlackBerry dock for charging as well as accessories like cases. And there's also a standard micro USB port for charging next to a micro HDMI port for connecting it to a larger display. On the very top, you had kind of small and recessed controls for the power switch, in addition to volume controls and a play-pause key. I'll explain a little bit more about power in a second. And on the back, you have this very classic BlackBerry soft touch rubber material, which makes it feel really nicely textured. There's the BlackBerry logo and a 5-megapixel camera with autofocus that actually works, again, very well. The screen itself, even though it's only a 720p panel, is extremely vibrant and it uses IPS technology, so even in 2017, the viewing angles are quite impressive and colors are well saturated and balanced. So again, if you're watching movies or browsing the web, looking at ebooks, maybe some comics, it really pops and shows off one of the strong points of the PlayBook, which is its display. So previously I mentioned the power, and one of the nice features of BlackBerry PlayBook carried into BlackBerry OS 10 was its gesture for powering the unit on. Again, you can swipe from the very bottom to the top of the display to wake the screen to use. In fact, it's something I wish a lot of more Android phones would bring up. Just having this function to quickly swipe up is so seamless, especially if you're using it with just one hand to quickly turn the display on. So taking a quick look at the operating system and the UI experience, everything is still very fluid and responsive. You really only notice the slowdown once you try to tackle things like complex web pages and if you want to run more GPU-intensive games, since it only has 1 gigabyte of RAM. Otherwise, on the very top, there's time and date information automatically synced to Wi-Fi once you turn it on and connect it to internet. There's also a rotation lock, Wi-Fi status, Bluetooth status, which you can turn on and toggle very easily, battery status as well. You can change the screen brightness. There is a proximity and ambient light sensor as well. Under settings, we have the ability to toggle between hardware, OS, as well as memory status. There's Wi-Fi information, software updates, your BlackBerry ID account syncing, and of course you can set up BlackBerry Bridge, which as aforementioned really enhances the function of something like the PlayBook. In fact, it's a very early concept of kind of this modular platform, and it's still a dream of computing technology today. The ability to have maybe your phone as the centerpiece for everything that you do. It's basically your computer, and you maybe pop it onto a dock and it transforms into a laptop, or you connect it into this tablet and it becomes this larger screen, is kind of one of the early visions that the PlayBook tried to play on. Obviously, it was a bit ahead of its time, and it wasn't the most refined version or product of that, but at least it's something that I can understand what they were trying to go for. There's also things like you can change the brightness of the display, HDMI settings can be set, language, keyboard, and the like. So speaking of the keyboard, I wanted to take a quick look at that, since BlackBerry, of course, is infamous for its keyboard as well as for its security, and both of those things are still decent on the PlayBook today. If I tap on something such as, let's say, Amazon, and right now, this is a good test for how the browser still works. You can see how it's definitely a little bit more sluggish. If you're planning on getting this for heavy multitasking and web browsing, it no longer works super well because even low-cost entry-level Android tablets are more optimized on the software side of things. With that being said, most complex pages do still fully load, even if they have flash elements, video elements, and pinch to zoom gestures are still going to work. There's a bit of checkerboarding just because it takes a little longer to think now, but most of the things that you want to access can still be done, including streaming video content and watching movies, since it does support Flash technically. So anyways, let's see if there is a place I can tap on a search key, maybe on the very top, and the keyboard pops up. So the screen itself is really sensitive, and although it's a 7-inch panel as opposed to something like 10 inches, it's still really easy to type either on a flat surface or if you're holding it. It's extremely responsive, and since it is multi-touch enabled, it's very accurate as well. It's one of the better keyboards that I've seen from a 7-inch tablet perspective, just because it is so accurate. Not so much in terms of error detection. It doesn't seem to offer too much software that auto-corrects your text, although this is a feature you can turn on if you're doing emails and longer PDF or Word documents. Over here, we can also change a language, and you can see you have this pretty comprehensive list of languages and supports. There's also one to toggle back and forth between numbers and as well as symbols that I can go through and, of course, go back. There isn't haptic feedback, there isn't vibrations, but you do get this audible click from the speakers to sense that you've clicked and typed on something, which is pretty good. I can also swipe down from the actual web browser that's built in here to have a quick look at the address bar, which is very easy to edit, and it also shows off tabs in a really elegant way. Again, it's using gestures, and I can multitask between different tabs very easily. You can also download any video content you want to save. Under settings, you can add a bookmark, for instance. You can add permissions, privacy and security can be set as well. And in addition, you can also look at your recent history and toggle back and forth between different orientations. There's also a article view, which will take away all the images and try to render the page in a way where there's only text and makes it really easy to read. And if you switch the orientation using the accelerometer, it works even better, and you can see it as quite similar to a Kindle, in fact, in terms of ebook reading and having this comfortable experience. When it comes to battery life, the BlackBerry PlayBook is actually still quite similar to when it first debuted, and that's a decent thing. I can get roughly 6 to 7 hours of usage out of this before I need to recharge it. So it definitely lasts me about a day and a half to 2 days of use before I need to recharge it. And obviously, if you have internet turned off and you're just reading some books, if you're just checking some quick email, maybe even playing a few games here and there, nothing too taxing, it's going to last for even longer. So it works actually pretty well. So again, the main thing I wanted to discuss about the browser, it's definitely outdated. So if you're getting a tablet here in 2017, mainly for the purpose of web browsing, I would no longer recommend the PlayBook. At this time, I will mention that the processing package here is a dual-core 1 GHz processor. So again, not nearly as swift as the quad-core processors that we've come to expect, even in relatively modest tablets that are new today. So that is one area where there's a difference. But again, video content can still be interacted with and watched. You can stream Hulu, Netflix, and other websites without any problems as far as loading up videos, and it makes for a pretty good experience. A little bit on the pricier side of the spectrum, as you would expect. However, it is a unlocked GSM World phone with 2 SIM card support. There's also a 13 megapixel. So you can hear that the video quality here is really strong. It's realistic. It's definitely one of the best speakers that I've experienced on a tablet. Although it doesn't offer too much bass, everything else is clean, it's loud, and it's crisp sounding. If you try to zoom in, you can see that everything takes a few seconds to properly render and that there's some checkerboarding, but otherwise it still works surprisingly well for a tablet that's verging on 5 years old. And overall it can definitely still make for a decent web browsing experience, although not as a primary web browser. So if you don't want to use the built-in browser, which a lot of websites aren't officially supported now, you can download a few secondary options. One is Dolphin Browser, another is Origami Browser, and both of these are fairly elegant and nicely designed browsers that are still up to date in the BlackBerry world, which is the App Store, and they have been updated to still work without any issues with things like YouTube and other more current sites. And loading times are a little bit slower than BlackBerry's own default browser, but everything else can still be done. So taking a look at Origami, for instance, you can change things such as look at private view, you can actually turn flash on or off, you have the ability to scroll in different ways, to render the page in a lower fidelity so it doesn't take as much RAM to turn on or use, and there's also a booster mode which also makes things a little bit more speedy. So if we just wanted to do something like search up maybe just like PlayBook, and I will mention that the default browser uses Bing as the search engine, although the Origami browser uses Google, so that is one difference. So you can see that it loads up fairly quickly, and I can even tap on Wikipedia just to take a quick look at what the PlayBook's about, and then hopefully you can see that it definitely renders pages a lot faster. There isn't any checkerboarding pattern, and it's a bit more updated. So this is some alternatives you can use, although obviously heavy pages will still take quite a while to completely load. Other utility apps from the PlayBook are still fairly consistent. It's a beautiful study in design, so I still love it. You can see the clock interface is really just beautiful, and you can take a look and display this maybe as your bedside alarm clock, and it works really well, especially if you put it on the dock. There's this timer, stopwatch, everything is very cohesive, and there's also a weather app that you can use to quickly glance at data that's relevant to you, and it changes and refreshes the background accordingly to display what weather is going on around your microclimate. For voice notes, it takes advantage of the built-in microphone on the PlayBook, which is actually surprisingly good. It's a great microphone. You'll see here include Press Reader, which is a way to consolidate some quick online newspapers and news sources that you might be interested in. You can categorize by genres, and it saves it and automatically updates things. It's a little bit sluggish now in 2017, but it works. Other things, calculator, pretty much a basic utility, also designed by BlackBerry. You get a little bit of lag, but not too much. Previous calculations displayed over on the side, and then you can also kind of pretty easily tap through and do any quick calculations. Calendar, another quick utility app, not anything really too exciting going on here, but this is one of the areas where you're able to kind of sync it with your phone, which is fairly interesting. You can add a new appointment, and again, if you're connected to a BlackBerry phone, it will communicate between the two, which makes it actually really compelling since the screen here is a lot easier to work with and do productivity with. So we also have things like Print to Go, which is Wi-Fi printing. There's Adobe Reader, which is built on here. There's a regular video viewer and MP3 player, which works very well. And Docs to Go, which allows you to quickly edit as well as create new Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents, which is fairly useful. So for instance, let's tap and create a new Word doc. And since it has Bluetooth, of course, in addition to Wi-Fi, some may have 3G connectivity. You can obviously connect a keyboard and use it to type, but the on-screen keyboard, again, works really well. You can see the predictive text coming into play here, and this is how it works really nicely. You can change things like font. You can also pinch in between words. I can really easily scroll between words, change the boldness. Two final apps I want to look at include Bing Maps, and this is its default app for locating where you are, as well as checking out any additional information. And it also automatically redirects you to the browser and opens up a Bing page where you can also search through things and look at maps here. It works pretty well, but obviously we prefer Google Maps since it seems to be a lot more complete and there's a lot more features for panning, scrolling, and interacting with a touchscreen display than on Bing Maps. But if you want to check out some quick navigation services, it works, even though the Playbook doesn't have GPS built in. Finally, I want to look at the camera, and the camera here, again, it's actually surprisingly good. Although tablets are still not, obviously something that you want to really take too many images with, it's an autofocus sensor, it's easy to zoom in, you can turn on geotagging, you can minimize the camera screen, you can see how it's still really running in the background. Same thing with the browser. If you have a YouTube video that's playing, even if you exit into one of these cards, it's still running, and that's a really neat view to truly tell that multitasking is being done here, which is, again, quite impressive with these hardware specifications. So if we look at some of the images I just snapped to give you guys a demo, you can see that in outdoor and in good lighting, it actually works really well. Definitely great to show off images to friends and family, connect to a larger display, use it as a digital photo frame and the like. Those are all valid usages of the Playbook now. And some people have even found a way to mount this onto their car and use it as a smart dashboard accessory, since they can find some corresponding apps through the BlackBerry store. So again, works really well. Fine detail is actually pretty decent. It only starts to fade away if you zoom all the way into particular subjects, but overall color saturation and balance are really nicely done for a tablet camera. There's also help and documentation in that form if you want to use it, and of course a file manager to Playbook, BlackBerry's first and only tablet as of 2017. And it's a bit of a shame because we really love the hardware and everything that BlackBerry was trying to build, but the pricing strategy of launching it at the same caliber as an iPad, $500 for a 16GB version that has a 7-inch display, was way too aggressive with limited apps. In 2017, I would say, you can still consider it if you're getting it for watching movies, streaming videos, and saving movies to the memory. Some come with 64GB, which is still quite a lot. And if you want to get it for some quick productivity, or if you are already part of the BlackBerry ecosystem, it makes for a pretty compelling companion product, especially if you can get it for, let's say, under $40. It's very inexpensive, and some of the ways that the UI is built is still quite fast and beautiful here in 2017. But if you're getting it as your primary device to check, let's say, emails or to really browse heavy websites, do a lot of multitasking, it's no longer going to be suitable. And also, if you don't have a BlackBerry device already, it doesn't make the most compelling tablet in the world. Again, we can take a look at BlackBerry World, and what you'll discover is that apps are very limited, although you can still find a decent few free apps as well as games that you can play, but you can see some have been updated to 2017, but other ones have kind of remained in the same way since they were first released. And especially if we do something like, let's say, search by a specific thing like apps, and then look at just your top free apps, you have just this very small list, and it doesn't go any further. So this is essentially a differentiation. If you are planning on installing tons of games and built-in apps, you want to explore that, this is not the platform I think that will really work, unless you want to play around with sideloading your own Android apps, and some of them are still quite buggy and not super responsive. But overall, as far as some quick and essential apps such as Facebook, and if you're not expecting the most up-to-date things, it does mostly still work, and you can see some of the current reviews are dated not too long ago. So for some general usage, it still definitely works. I would say in 2017, it makes it kind of a tough sell despite a really beautiful UI and beautiful hardware, just because the pricing and popularity of tablets is plummeting. So you can get something like a Kindle Fire now for under $30, which makes it really similar if you get a used or secondhand Playbook. And the Playbook is not nearly as powerful in terms of its app. It's better built, and it offers a beautiful and, in my opinion, a better UI, UX multitasking experience, but that might not be strong enough to compel users here in 2017. But if you've been holding off, or if you're a collector and you think, wow, I finally want to get my hands on a Playbook, you definitely still should, because there's tons of utilities that you can still find and discover as long as you think a little bit out of the box and keep your expectations modest. Thanks for watching this retro review and throwback of the BlackBerry PlayBook, the ill-fated 7-inch tablet by BlackBerry.